He grew up watching others play by the rules, never questioning the invisible fences that kept them in line, and from the very beginning, he knew he would not be one of them. The world, as he saw it, was not governed by morality but by leverage, not by honesty but by perception. If someone could bend the truth into a shape that fit their purpose, if they could move faster than the conscience of those around them, then they could win. And winning was all that mattered. His first business was not a business at all, but a scheme built on borrowed confidence. He sold products he didn't yet have, promised services he had no intention of fulfilling, and relied on charm and quick words to keep suspicion at bay. For a time, it worked flawlessly. People trusted him because he wore trust like a tailored suit, smiling at all the right moments, tilting his head in practiced sincerity. When the gaps in his promises began to show, he was already one step ahead, weaving another story to cover the holes. Each lie was not an accident, but a tool, a calculated move in a game where truth was only one of many possible strategies. What he discovered was that people did not want reality. They wanted reassurance. They wanted to believe that success could be bought cheaply, that shortcuts existed, that the right connection could lift them above the grind of ordinary work. He gave them what they craved, packaging illusions as opportunities, and they thanked him for it. By the time they realized the truth, he had already moved on to the next eager crowd. This pattern became his foundation, and from it, he built something resembling an empire. As his ventures grew, so did his reputation, though the version of him the public knew was nothing like the man he was. Outwardly, he was a self-made entrepreneur, a bold thinker who disrupted stagnant industries and created wealth from thin air. Behind closed doors, he manipulated contracts, bullied competitors with underhanded tactics, and forged alliances that were sealed not with trust, but with mutual blackmail. To him, business was never about creation or service. It was a battlefield where victory meant survival, and morality was a weakness to be exploited. There were lessons in his rise, though none that could be found in textbooks or seminars. He proved that charisma could outweigh credibility, that an image carefully curated could silence questions, that greed in others could always be weaponized. His employees learned to mirror his methods, cutting corners wherever possible, prioritizing appearance over substance, and treating ethics as optional. Those who resisted did not last long in his world. To work with him was to accept that the line between right and wrong was not a line at all, but a blur to be adjusted as needed. Inevitably, cracks formed. Whispers of fraud, lawsuits that vanished mysteriously, investors who disappeared into silence. These shadows followed him wherever he went. Yet even in the face of scandal, he managed to twist the narrative. He was the victim of jealousy, he claimed, the target of competitors who feared his innovation. He turned each accusation into free publicity, each investigation into proof of his influence. The world, hungry for stories of ruthless success, applauded his resilience. Few cared enough to look closer. The tragedy, or perhaps the brilliance, of his journey was not that he deceived, but that so many wanted to be deceived. People preferred the myth of the fearless entrepreneur to the reality of a manipulative cheat. They admired his results without questioning his methods, forgetting that every empire built on lies carries the weight of collapse within its foundation. He understood this truth as well, but it never concerned him. For him, the game was not about permanence, but about momentum, not about building something lasting, but about staying ahead long enough to enjoy the spoils. In the end, his story was less about him than it was about the world that allowed him to thrive. He was a mirror reflecting the greed, the impatience, and the desperation of those who bought into his illusions. His legacy was not the businesses he founded, most of which dissolved into nothing once he moved on, but the lesson he left behind, that success without morality is possible, but it is always corrosive. It consumes trust, destroys institutions, and leaves behind a trail of disillusionment. He never regretted the choices he made. He saw regret as a luxury for those who could afford honesty. For him, every cheat was a strategy, every betrayal a necessary step, every victim a casualty of ambition. The story of his life became a parable, not of inspiration but of warning, a reminder that the world is not divided neatly between heroes and villains, but shaped by those willing to blur the lines. And while his name might never be remembered in the way he once dreamed, his shadow lingers in the lessons of every deal gone wrong, every shortcut that collapses, and every business built on sand rather than stone. He thrived in the chaos he created, and for a long time, it seemed nothing could touch him. Every scandal that threatened to unravel his empire only made him sharper, teaching him new ways to manipulate perception. He became a master of timing, announcing bold new ventures whenever whispers of fraud grew too loud, securing partnerships with influential figures whenever his reputation wavered, distracting the world with spectacle whenever the truth threatened to surface. He did not just cheat people, he cheated time itself, always racing one step ahead of the reckoning that seemed destined but never arrived. His rise infected others. Young dreamers looked up to him, studying his interviews, mimicking his confidence, and believing that his brand of ruthless cunning was the true definition of success. They saw how he bent morality and mistook it for strength. They saw how he silenced doubters and called it leadership. Soon, entire generations of entrepreneurs began adopting his methods, convinced that honesty was outdated and that integrity was for those too weak to play the game. His influence spread like poison, unseen but undeniable, reshaping industries into reflections of his own distorted values. But behind the curtain of triumph, there was rot. His partners lived in constant paranoia, each knowing they could be discarded the moment their usefulness faded. His employees feared him more than they respected him, for they had seen how he crushed dissent without hesitation. Even his personal life was little more than a stage, relationships treated as transactions, loyalty rewarded only so long as it served his goals. The closer someone stood to him, the faster they burned out, drained by the endless demands of a man who valued results above humanity. The turning point came quietly, not with a dramatic downfall, but with the slow erosion of control. A deal he had orchestrated collapsed unexpectedly when one of his oldest allies betrayed him, selling secrets to a rival who had been waiting for years to strike. For the first time, his charm could not mask the cracks, his promises could not cover the losses. Investors fled. Competitors pounced. Journalists who had once admired his boldness now smelled blood in the water, and the stories they wrote painted him not as a visionary, but as a fraud. Yet even then, he did not yield. He doubled down, spinning new lies, creating new illusions, and convincing himself that he could rebuild once more. But this time, the world was less forgiving. People had learned, finally, to question the man they had once idolized. His empire, built on fragile foundations, began collapsing piece by piece until all that remained was the man himself, stripped of power, stripped of influence, and left to face the silence he had always outrun. What haunted him most was not the loss of wealth, but the realization that he had never truly built anything at all. The companies bore his name, the headlines carried his face, but nothing remained that could survive without him. There were no legacies, no loyal followers, no enduring marks of greatness, only ruins and memories of deception. He had played the game brilliantly, but the game had no finish line, no final victory. In the end, his cleverness had cheated him as well, leaving him hollow, forgotten, and irrelevant. The story of his life became a warning whispered in business schools and boardrooms, a cautionary tale about ambition without principle. Some dismissed him as a villain who got what he deserved, while others quietly admired the scale of his audacity. But the lesson remained clear. Success earned through deceit carries within it the seeds of its own destruction. His empire did not fall because others defeated him. It fell because he had never truly built it on anything solid. He once said in one of his final interviews, "Morality is just a story we tell ourselves to feel comfortable." Perhaps he believed it until the very end. Yet his downfall suggested another truth, one he could never accept, that morality is not a story but a structure, invisible but essential, without which even the grandest empire will inevitably crumble.